But the kids will come to me and they'll be like, Mrs. Baker, I'm still struggling so much. And what else can I do? And I'm like, have you been using Glass Companion? And they're like, no. And I'm like, that's what you need to do
Yeah.
because the ones that are using it are doing great. Like
Hmm.
they've grown so much and they're doing so much better on their unit exams and on their assignments.
My name is Bruno Morlan, and I'm a social studies teacher in Lafayette, California. In this series, Produce for Class Companion, I interview teachers from various different subjects to highlight some of the innovative work that they're doing in their classes. Candace Baker teaches in Minooka Community High School in Illinois. She mostly teaches AP Human Geography, and she has started to use Class Companion to fit the needs of her students. In a vocabulary-heavy course, she started to use Class Companion to push her students beyond rote memorization of terms. In our interview, she talks about how she slowly started to implement Class Companion with her students and how much success it has brought them. Here's a little bit of our conversation. And when did you start using it? How did you hear about it?
So I discovered Class Companion at the very beginning of the school year this past year. So it would have been in August of 2023. I'm pretty sure I first heard about it on the AP Human Geography Facebook group. Somebody had mentioned it. And it was just kind of like, they were just like, has anybody tried this before? Has anybody seen it? And I was like, like, that's interesting. We've been hearing a lot about AI and the students using AI and chat GPT and all that kind of stuff. And this was the first time I had heard about like having a tool that the teachers could use on our end, on our side to help improve like the learning and teaching process. So I was intrigued. So I started kind of, investigating and playing around and messing around with it a little bit. And I immediately was kind of in shock as to how beneficial it could possibly be for my students. And I didn't at first have a plan of how I was going to incorporate it. I just knew that eventually, like, we would be using it. So this year, I decided also, like, we are a very vocab heavy course.
Mm-hmm.
So there are over 800 vocab terms that these students have to be exposed to and like try to learn throughout the year. So we like start right off the bat with like getting these vocab terms to them. And it's always a struggle figuring out like how to get the students like interacting with the terms without it being too painful because everybody
Mm-hmm.
knows like doing vocab is the worst. So I've been trying to experiment with like different ways of having the students do it that makes it a little less painful. So this year I actually did have them. I printed out sheets for them where they would like just write down the definitions. And then all they had to do beyond that was just give me an example and explain why it was an example. And I thought, oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's so easy. Like they'll be able to do that, no problem. And then on that sheet, it was like on cardstock, and then they could actually cut it out and turn them into
Oh, yeah.
flashcards. So it's like, oh, perfect. Like then it's actually a useful tool that they can take with them. And right
Mm-hmm.
away, I realized, yes, the kids have no problem with copying down a definition like that. That's pretty standard. We know how to do that. When it actually comes to finding examples that are related to like the context of human geography and then
Mm-hmm.
explaining why it was an example, they had no clue how to do that. They literally were like, because it is, or they would just eat the definition. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, well, that's not really deep enough. You have to actually prove that you understand the concept through this. And they
Mm-hmm.
were not getting that. And also with 70 students, my biggest struggle was, well, how do I have time to sit down with each of them and be like, okay, here's where you need to go a little bit further with this, or here's something to think about. And I just don't have the time to do that because I have these 70 students and then I also have 90 on level students that I'm
Right.
working with. And there's only so many hours in the day. And we have block schedules too. So I'm only seeing these kids every other school day.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, you know what? I kind of forgot about it for a couple weeks, but like, what if I incorporated Class Companion into them just doing their daily vocab? So I began to set up for each section or vocab just very simply in Class Companion. I would just the prompt they were given was explain an example of, and then I would just type in the vocab word. And
Mm-hmm.
so the very first time that I was like, and I never made it mandatory. It was always optional and they would do it on their own. They could use it if they wanted, just as a
Mm-hmm.
tool to kind of help them try to figure it out. And after the very first time my students used it, they were like, that was amazing. And when I got their vocab back, and all of a sudden it went from being like 2-word responses to being like paragraphs that were like great explanations, I was like, I was so excited. I was so happy that we found a way that they could get that immediate feedback that helped them like dig deeper and see like how far they needed to go with their explanations without me like spending hours and hours and hours staying after school and before school and like meeting with them one-on-one. And it improved like by leaps and bounds their understanding of how far they had to go.
So I'm going to jump in and show you what it's like to be one of Candace's students and the assignments that they would see on Class Companion. So I'm under my assignments tab, and you can see that I've already started this assignment because I've opened it. It's 5.10 vocabulary from Unit 5. And in the instructions, I see that I have 8 attempts to respond to each question. And every time that I give an attempt, when it's not correct, I get extra feedback. And if it is correct, I'm able to move on to the next question. So the first question is explain an example of dead zones. And notice that all of her questions are in the same format. Explain an example of, and then the key term. And I'm going to enter in here one of the responses that one of Candace's students actually gave and see if it gives us a point. So I will paste it in there and wait for a reply. All right, and sure enough, Candace's students are very smart, and it's given us a correct answer. Now I have to move on to the following question. And one of the great things as a student with Class Companion is that if you don't know what a word means, or if you are completely stuck, you can ask Class Companion for some help. So I can ask Class Companion if it can give me a definition. Okay, and so here is the definition the Class Companion gave me. So it refers to the removal of forest or stand of trees where the land is thereafter converted to a non-forest use. So if I were a student and I still didn't really know this word, I could potentially just write a very generic answer and say the following. And it's told me that I am incorrect. I've given a reason, but I'm still giving very generic information. So now I'm really stuck. I can ask Class Companion for some help. Okay, so my hint is a large tropical rainforest that has significantly been affected by deforestation. So this is enough for me to get on my way and maybe start writing about the Amazon rainforest. So I'll write the following. And now I'm going to wait to see if my answer is sufficient. And sure enough, it says excellent work, and I can continue on my way. So you can see the benefit that a student might get out of this conversation that they're having with Class Companion, and very incrementally getting to the place where they need to go. I guess I assume that like whenever you started using it, you're using it to prepare specifically for those FRQs that you have. And maybe if you found any other unique ways that you can use it to support the students or the normal work that they do. But that sounds really great that they're able to now use that tool to then get better examples. And then you act as that kind of like last check mark, right? Like, yes, you are on the right track, or no, you're not on the right track. But I mean, it's so much more valuable when they're getting that feedback immediately as opposed to waiting for you to hand back all the vocabulary.
They're at the point developmentally where they need that help. So I don't feel like they're, cheating themselves, because they really are. All it is they're getting feedback. It's not like Class Companion is giving them the answer. It's like, hey, think about this. Or maybe like give us a little bit more. And so it prompts them to be like, oh yeah, like I guess I could think about it in that way.
That's really great. I think one of the coolest things about doing these interviews is that I get to hear about like all of the different ways in which teachers are using it, because like obviously you can use it to prepare for the standard parts of an exam, but teachers are modifying the assignments to fit their like daily needs, like vocabulary. And I've also heard of other teachers using it as a reflection tool, and it can grade their reflection on whether or not they're actually thinking about the learning that they did through that class period, or exit tickets. That's really cool that it's really supporting your students. Now, has the success that you've seen with it in your class spread to other teachers, or at the very least, are they getting curious about how your kids are doing it with this?
So I went down the hallway one day and I was like, hey, like, I don't know how you feel about like, incorporating AI into the classroom and stuff like that. But like so far, like this has been really cool. And I think it would be really good for the history teachers that when you guys teach so many more of these skills, like you gotta, start with the SAQs and then the LEQs and the DBQs. And there's so many different elements that the kids need to practice. I was like, obviously, like, I don't have to use it for that, but like, I've kind of looked through some of this stuff for AP World and AP US. And I was like, it looks like it could be super helpful. And he was like, yeah, maybe it's kind of okay. Like, I'll look into it. And he didn't for a couple weeks. And then when he finally did, once again, he came back to me and was like, I'm so sorry I didn't listen to you. This is so amazing too. So kind of our struggle after we changed our course curriculum 2 years ago, the freshmen used to take a pre-AP class where they actually we taught them how to answer SAQs and LAQs and DBQs. So then once they showed up to AP World, like they already had that foundation. They already kind of knew. They weren't experts yet, but it's not like we weren't starting from scratch. Like they already had an idea of what they were going to need to do. Well, after they changed the curriculum, now the kids don't have pre-AP. They're thrown into AP Geo. And in human Geo, we don't do DBQs. And I wish I had time to teach them those skills and like help prepare them for next year. But like we got to worry about this year. So like they haven't been exposed to those things at all yet. So then they show up to AP World and they've got a lot of room to grow. And so he's been able to start incorporating that in, and even like, because they usually start out like, just focusing on the thesis statement. So he's like given them all types of assignments on Class Companion where like they just get, they're just working on a thesis statement and then they get that immediate feedback. The history teachers know, like it's so hard to teach those skills, and Class Companion just is one of those tools that makes it so much easier on us. And I think is so beneficial for the students to get that immediate feedback.
Are you seeing like a correlation with the ones who do the optional practice on Class Companion and their scores on tests?
Absolutely.
Right.
And that's what the kids will come to me and they'll be like, Mrs. Baker, I'm still struggling so much. And what else can I do? And I'm like, have you been using Class Companion? And they're like, no. And I'm like, that's what you need to do because the ones that are using it are doing great. Like they've grown so much and they're doing so much better on their unit exams and on their assignments. So that's my note. I'm like, use Class Companion.
I've had students come up to me and say like, so before the AP exam, are you going to open up like a bunch of Class Companion assignments for us to do? It's like, you want me to assign more?
Post them, my kids email me. They're like, Mrs. Baker, they're going to be emailing me probably this weekend because I gave them their first Unit 6 vocab and I haven't put it in Class Companion yet. So I'm going to get emails. They're going to be like, when are you going to put that in Class Companion? So that's like the first thing on my to-do list Monday morning to get those.
That's amazing.